ghosted again. When work relationships break down, companies break down. Why does it feel so bad?
Relationships are integral to human well-being. With ghosting, there's none of that.
It might just be your fault.
This is a symptom of a poor value exchange. Address the trust issue first. Like, give them an exit ramp, not an escape hatch.
Ghosted. Hi, I'm Jill Wiltfong, Chief Marketing Officer for Korn Ferry, and this is Briefings, our deep dive into topics that corporate leaders need to care about. You need to reach your colleague or your boss, so you make the phone call, send the email, write the text, all with the best of intentions, and then nada, zip, zilch, crickets. Congratulations, you've been officially ghosted. The New York Times has called the phenomenon a, quote, epidemic of unsatisfactory conclusions and unexplained rejections. The issue might seem trivial, but it's actually critically important for leaders to address it, and fast. Because when work relationships break down, companies break down. So, given that, today, let's see how precisely leaders can get people to give up the ghost on ghosting, as we take a closer look at how we can all keep from getting ghosted again. Before we start, if you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts on this topic. With us now is Frances Weir, a business psychologist with many years of experience plumbing the depths of why working professionals behave the way they do and how they can possibly adjust certain behaviors to improve performance and collaboration. So a very welcome guest for this conversation. Frances, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So you've actually said that ghosting has a basis in evolutionary psychology, which is a pretty striking idea on the face of it. I mean, were our caveman ancestors, Frances, not responding to one another in a timely fashion? Tell me what you mean when you say that this is kind of rooted in evolution here.
Sure. So I think there's an evolutionary component in that we have very strong preferences to be in group. And historically, that's where we found safety. I think if you layer in something like social psychology, so there's studies where we will give answers we know are wrong just because the group says so. So these really strong rooted preferences for us creates a them. And this desire to put distance between the two. And I think that can absolutely be something that's a precursor to ghosting. And that's why we tell whether, in your example, someone starting a new company, or if it's an applicant, we tell them to build rapport as much as possible. And often why rapport, the most effective form of that is on establishing similarities. We're creating an us.
All right. So for someone who has been ghosted, some psychologists might say that individual can experience something called the Zeigarnik effect. And that's where we tend to ruminate on things that haven't achieved a resolution. And you've said being ghosted can even affect our brain chemistry, which is interesting. So what exactly is going on inside us when we get ghosted? Why does it feel so bad from the perspective of the brain and the psyche?
Maybe it's best to explain what feels really good, and then we can understand why ghosting feels really bad. So what feels really good is humans interacting like this, engaging through storytelling, reflecting back. That's what activates attachment, fires our mirror neurons, increases oxytocin, so that feel-good hormone. And with ghosting, there's none of that. There's no humaneness in a one-sided exchange. With ghosting, what's even worse is it usually follows an exchange that might have felt that way.
Well, you surprised to see me, Joseph?
That depends.
On what?
Can you prove you're self-aware?
That's a difficult question, Dr. Tiger. Can you prove that you are?
That's a scene from the movie Transcendence in which Johnny Depp plays an AI researcher who has uploaded his consciousness into a computer. We're certainly not far off from that today, with reports of people sending AI avatars to take meetings in their place and things like that. Francis, given AI's power to augment communication, do you think that it can help cure the current ghosting epidemic, or could it possibly make it worse somehow?
There is just so much research out there that tells us that relationships are integral to human well-being, happiness. And so I find it hard to believe that removing humans from a process can improve outcomes. And so maybe I'm cautious, but for now, I'd say the best use case to augment communication would probably be in candidate management, client relationship management. I'd probably sooner task AI with closing the loop than I would with them building the relationship.
Finally, if you happen to be ghosted, because it's probably happened to all of us, what are some steps that you advise people to take, both to protect themselves psychologically and also possibly to remedy the situation with their colleague who's done the ghosting? Do you have some tips and things that we can keep in mind?
Yeah, so to answer both parts, I think ghosting can feel like an erasure of identity, which is the thing that gets to us the most. And so that's what triggers those feelings of I don't matter or I am not important. And so I think a very good antidote to that is to engage in activities or with people who really bolster that identity. They remind you who you are. Whoever it is that's ghosting you, the colleague, the boss, the organization, research suggests we will get a lot further with kindness than we will with anything else. I'd say if you do choose to continue to reach out, to feel like you're chasing, as much as you can, do so with empathy, curiosity, maybe some concern even. And even if they never get back to you, I think you'll lose a lot less of yourself in the process.
Yeah, nice. Very good advice. Francis, thank you for sharing your thoughts here. A lot to chew on, as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've looked at ghosting from the personal point of view. When we return, we'll talk to a people strategy expert to see what responsibility companies should be taking in the matter and why, if you're being ghosted, it might just be your fault. Stay tuned.
Hi, and welcome to This Week in Leadership. I'm Rupak Bhattacharya, and here's a quick look at what else is happening in business.
Job hugging is in.
In a trend known as job hugging, employees plan to stay in their jobs longer than they have in the past 2 years, according to one study. Experts say a sense of global events being unpredictable and unprecedented, combined with looming AI disruption, is making workers increasingly unsure about taking the risk of leaving their current role.
Rolling back price match policy.
8 in 10 consumers expect firms to match prices on goods. The only problem? Companies are increasingly putting an end to their price matching policies. Retail professionals say that today's era of slim margins and shifting tariffs have made the logistics of price matching near impossible.
Older folks that are still working.
More than 500,000 people over the age of 80 are currently in the US workforce, more than twice as many as during the 1990s. And this trend shows no signs of slowing. Some experts suggest that with the shrinking availability of workers overall, perhaps the economy has to rely on older workers remaining in the workforce to keep it growing. For more insights from This Week in Leadership, head to kornferry.com/insights. Now back to Jill and our episode, Ghosted Again.
We're back talking about a ghosting epidemic in the workplace that could spell doom for company culture. And with us now is Roger Philby, global lead of Korn Ferry's people strategy and performance practice, who spends lots of time not ghosting, but helping leaders and organizations to improve their communication and build really critical connections. Roger, thanks for being here.
Of course. Good to see you again, Jill.
So that last clip that we just showed featured Rachel McAdams in The Notebook, chastising Ryan Gosling for supposedly ghosting her. Of course, ghosting in the business world can change the stakes from broken hearts to broken balance sheets. And Roger, you say much of the reason why ghosting is getting worse at the office comes down to remote work. Tell me about that.
Ghosting is easier when you don't feel connected in the first place or seen. And I think remote work has most definitely meant that bumping that remote call is a lot easier than someone turning up on your doorstep or meeting you in a room. So I think there's just a sense of workplace detachment is causing people to not feel comfortable with ghosting. I don't think people ever feel comfortable, but it's sort of more acceptable and easier to do. I think there's no friction to it, which is one of the issues.
You also have an interesting take on ghosting, which is that if you're being ghosted, it's your fault. How is that?
I had this amazing coach who was a shaman, Jill. He was an incredible guy. I once complained to him that a client wasn't responding the way I was expecting them to my witty, brilliant communication. And he said to me, actually, your communication is getting the response it deserves. I do think ghosting is a symptom of a poor value exchange. Not always, of course. Some people are just plain mean. But actually, in most instances, it's a symptom of a poor value exchange. And so I always try and think, if I'm getting ghosted, what is it I'm doing that might mean that person would feel like that's acceptable?
And so you just ghost them. You just stop replying to texts. You stop returning phone calls. It's as if you don't exist. And for the other person, it's panic. And then once they realize you're fine because they can look on social media and see you're fine, now the massive amounts of insecurity. What did I do? Was it me? Oh, it destroys someone's self-worth. All because one person was too afraid to have an uncomfortable, difficult conversation.
That's a leadership expert, Simon Sinek, describing the awful feeling of being ghosted. But in an interesting twist, research shows that ghosting can harm not just the person being ghosted, but the person doing the ghosting too. So it's just bad all around for everyone. So Roger, what would you tell leaders they should be doing to try to keep this kind of behavior from continuing at their companies? How can they make it easier for colleagues to have those difficult conversations instead of avoiding one another?
I always think if ghosting is happening, to actually not address the ghosting issue, but address the trust issue first. Like, so maybe could we meet for a coffee? Could we have a virtual coffee? Can we share something about each other first and clarify the value exchange? Be open about the value exchange. Hey, this is what I'm hoping I'm going to get from you. You know, what will be good for you to get from me in order to make this valuable for you? If this hasn't got value for you, I completely understand. What would have value for you? Like, give them an exit ramp, not an escape hatch, so they just ignore you.
I'd like to end on an encouraging personal anecdote that you shared about being ghosted yourself recently. I wasn't the one ghosting, I promise. But tell me what happened and how did you work through that? Maybe there's something there we can all learn from it.
What happened in that particular example is I was communicating with a client that I thought it was important they heard me, and they weren't responding. And so I had to rethink about what the value was of that particular individual talking to me. And I came back to my first point, which is we don't have a relationship. How are they going to trust me? And so I called someone who I did have that relationship with and said, hey, can you ring this individual and let them know that actually talking to me has an inherent value to it and I can help with the problem they're trying to solve, because I genuinely think I can. The next minute I know, we're being booked in to have a call, and I said, could we meet face to face? And then we met face to face. And now that particular individual, not only do we have a close relationship, we have a trusted advisor relationship with each other, and they're a great client for Korn Ferry.
Great to have your very refreshing candor and experience here. I appreciate you being here today.
No problem. Thanks, Jill.
The executive producer of Briefings is Jonathan Dahl. Today's episode was produced by Rupak Bhattacharya and Zachary Dorr. And it was edited by Jaron Henry McRae. It contains reporting by Russell Perlman, Ariane Cohen, Peter Loria, and Megan Walsh. Our video segment contains original artwork by Fraser Milton, Haley Kennel, Jonathan Pink, and Sasha Kotschik. Don't forget to read our magazine, available at newsstands and at kornferry.com/briefings. That's it for Korn Ferry Briefings. I'm Jill Wiltfong. See you next time. We're recording. Don't say anything. Don't say anything.
I'm going to leave.